On the morning of December 29, a Jeju Air plane veered off the runway, exploded, and burst into flames while landing at Muan Airport. The catastrophic crash claimed the lives of 179 out of 181 people on board, leaving only 2. Images and videos capturing the tragedy have drawn widespread attention and left PE. The incident occurred as South Korea was embroiled in a major political crisis due to martial law and the impeachment. Discussions surrounding the aviation accident continue to dominate social media platforms. What did the lucky survivors say? Why has there been so much controversy over the 6 minutes leading up to the disaster? What is the full picture of the crash and the theories surrounding the cause of this tragic event? Let's dive into the details now. Before we begin today's story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our latest videos. The crash occurred at 9 hours 7 minutes AM on December 29 when a Jeju airplane veered off the runway during landing. The plane sped out of control and crashed into a barrier at Muan International Airport, about 288 kilometers southwest of Seoul. A total of 181 people, including 6 crew members, were aboard the plane returning from Bangkok, most of whom were South Korean, except for 2 Thai nationals. Video broadcast by local television stations showed the plane attempting to land without its landing gear deployed. The aircraft skidded along the ground, crashed into a concrete wall, exploded, and was engulfed in flames, almost completely destroyed by the massive explosion. At 8 hours 57 minutes AM, air traffic controllers had warned the plane about a collision risk in the area. A minute later, at 8 hours 58 minutes AM, the pilot of Flight 7C216 issued a distress signal. The plane was originally scheduled to land on runway 1 at 9 AM, but failed because its landing gear did not deploy, potentially due to a collision during descent. After circling the area due to the failed initial landing attempt, the plane attempted a belly landing because of the landing gear failure. The control tower instructed the plane to land in the opposite direction on runway 19. The crew followed the instructions, and the plane made an emergency belly landing. However, it appeared unable to slow down upon touching the ground. Ultimately, the plane skidded off the runway, collided with ground-based navigation equipment, crashed into the airport's perimeter fence, broke apart, and caught fire. On the afternoon of December 29, the South Korean Fire Department confirmed that 179 passengers had died, leaving only 2 survivors. Both survivors were crew members, rescued shortly after the crash and taken to a hospital in Mokpo for treatment. According to authorities, among the deceased, the youngest passenger was a 3-year-old boy, and the oldest was a 78-year-old man. Immediately after the disaster, multiple fire departments transitioned to search operations to recover the bodies. According to the Ministry of Transport, investigators recovered both black boxes from the wreckage, the cockpit voice recorder at 11:30 am and the flight data recorder at 2 hours 24 minutes PM. 8 aircraft accident investigators and 9 aviation safety inspectors quickly began their initial investigation at the scene. More than 1,500 personnel were mobilized for rescue and recovery efforts, including 490 firefighters, 455 police officers, and 340 military personnel. The airport's runway was closed until 5 am on January 1, 2025. A temporary morgue was set up at the airport, and authorities worked with families to arrange the transfer of identified victims to external facilities. The crash of the Jeju airplane in South Korea last Sunday is considered the worst aviation disaster since 1997. What exactly happened? What caused such a horrific accident? A bird strike has emerged as a possible contributing factor to the crash. Officials revealed that air traffic controllers had warned the plane about the risk of a bird strike just minutes before the accident. The precise timeline will be clarified once data from the recovered black boxes is analyzed. Officials also emphasized that runway length was not a factor in the crash. Both ends of the runway have safety buffer zones, before reaching the perimeter wall, and officials confirmed that the airport's design meets aviation safety standards. The theory of a bird strike as the cause of the crash gained traction when South Korean media reported the contents of a message sent by a passenger on the Jeju Air flight. The passenger sent a message to a family member just minutes before the crash. The message was sent at 9 a.m. local time on December 29, which was just about 3 minutes before the plane crashed onto the runway, hit the barrier, and caught fire at Muan International Airport. Airport staff also revealed that an unusually large flock of birds had been spotted on the runway at Muan International Airport on Sunday morning, hours before the crash. Staff members said they had never seen such a dense flock of birds around the airport before. The sighting of birds raised questions about the adequacy of bird control measures at the airport. Under South Korean law, airports are required to maintain year-round bird deterrence measures with dedicated personnel and equipment. While the exact cause is still under investigation, the incident has drawn international media attention. This has sparked widespread debate about the true cause of the tragedy. Reports of a possible bird strike have raised unanswered questions. Many experts have analyzed video footage of the aircraft's malfunction prior to the explosion and pointed out several anomalies. Images and videos released by local and international media show Jeju Air Flight 7, C216 landing on the runway belly first at high speed. The plane did not deploy either its front or rear landing gear, while smoke was seen rising from the tail section. Experts said the undercarriage of the plane, specifically the wheels used for takeoff and landing, appeared not to have fully deployed before touchdown. However, the reason why this component failed to operate remains unclear, though initial evidence suggests the landing gear malfunctioned after a bird strike. Analysts have raised several questions about the ground crew's response in supporting the plane during the emergency. They argue that in a situation like this, ground staff should have been better prepared before the plane touched down. In such an emergency, why weren't fire trucks stationed on the runway? Why wasn't fire suppression foam spread on the runway? Why did the plane land so far down the runway? Another major question is why there was a brick wall at the end of the runway. There were 2 pilots in the cockpit at the time of the crash, with the captain having 6,823 flight hours and the first officer approximately 1,650 hours. Given their extensive experience, it's puzzling how such a tragic incident could have occurred. These are the questions being raised by the public and experts as they follow developments in this horrific accident. According to South Korea's Ministry of Transport, the flight data recorder was found at 11:30 a.m., about 2.5 hours after the crash, and the cockpit voice recorder was found at 2:24 p.m. This provides investigators with all the parameters of the aircraft's systems. The voice recorder is expected to provide the most comprehensive analysis of what happened during this tragic accident. Experts have noted that a bird strike is unlikely to cause such severe landing gear malfunctions. Bird strikes are not uncommon. This type of incident happens quite frequently, but they typically don't cause damage to the aircraft, said Jeffrey Thomas, editor of Airline News. Australian aviation safety expert Jeffrey Dell also told the media, after being updated on the case, that he had never seen a bird strike prevent landing gear deployment. Australian aviation consultant Trevor Jensen stated that fire and rescue teams at airports are generally always prepared for belly landings. However, the lack of proactive response from staff at Muan International Airport left him baffled. Another question relates to the length of the runway. The runway used by the ill-fated plane was shorter than those at commercial airports in the Seoul area. Muan International Airport in South Jeolla Province has a main runway length of 2,800 meters, significantly shorter than Seoul's international airports, where even the shortest runway measures 3,750 meters. This has led to speculation that the shorter landing area may have been a factor in the plane skidding off the runway. Aviation analysts have said more evidence is needed before determining the exact cause of the crash, including speculation from local officials about the possibility of a bird strike before the plane landed. Investigators continue to work to uncover the cause of the tragedy, with some suggesting the investigation could take months or even years. Ongoing debates surround the incident, but what do the survivors, those who lived through this nightmare, have to say? Lee, one of the two Jeju Air flight attendants who survived the crash, was lucky to escape after the plane veered off the runway, caught fire, and shattered. He and a female colleague were rushed to Mokpo Hospital for emergency treatment after being pulled from the wreckage by rescue teams. The strong impact left them injured, but not in life-threatening condition. However, the crash left Lee in shock and suffering from temporary memory loss. Upon being taken to the hospital, he repeatedly asked doctors, "What happened? Why am I here?" The male flight attendant only recalled that before the crash, he was seated in the crew seat at the rear of the plane, with his seatbelt fastened. He remembered the plane touching down, but had no memory of what happened afterward. According to the hospital, Lee sustained a fractured left shoulder and a head injury, but remained conscious and able to walk. At the family's request, Lee was transferred to a hospital in Seoul later that day. Another survivor of the tragedy was a female flight attendant surnamed Koo, in her late 20s. She recounted in panic. Smoke was coming from one of the plane's engines, and then it exploded. Koo also suffered minor injuries, not life-threatening. Both survivors were rescued from the rear section of the plane and were conscious at the time. The information provided by the two flight attendants matched the accounts given later by witnesses on the ground. Yoo Jae-young, 41, a resident near Muan Airport, said he saw a spark on the plane's right wing before the crash. "As I was telling my family that the plane seemed to have a problem, I heard a loud explosion," he recalled. Another witness, surnamed Cho, said he was walking about 4 kilometers from the airport when he noticed the plane in distress. The man saw the plane descending, assumed it was about to land, and also noticed a spark. Then, there was a loud explosion, followed by smoke in the air and a series of subsequent explosions. Another witness, Kim Yong-cheo, 70, said the plane failed to land on its first attempt and had to circle back elsewhere before the crash. Kim recalled hearing metallic noises twice about 5 minutes before the accident. He looked up and saw the plane ascending after failing to land, before hearing a loud explosion and seeing thick black smoke billowing into the sky. Hours after the crash, families of those on board the ill-fated flight gathered in the lobby of Muan International Airport. Medical staff announced the identities of dozens of victims, confirmed through fingerprint identification. When Lee Jong-hyun, Muan fire chief, told families that most passengers were presumed dead, the room fell into silence. Soon after, cries and screams filled the airport as families mourned their loved ones. Hundreds of people of all ages were wailing, enduring the agonizing wait for news about their loved ones who had been on the fatal flight. Some families expressed anger at what they perceived to be a slow response from authorities and the airline. They had requested permission to approach the crash site early in the morning, but were denied due to the restricted nature of the airport area. When acting President Choi Sang-mok visited the airport, families surrounded him, demanding updates on their loved ones. Speaking at the crash site, Choi said no words of comfort could ease the pain these families were enduring. He promised full support for the families of those who had perished. Acting South Korean President Choi Sang-mok designated Muan as a special disaster zone after the crash of the passenger plane that left 179 people presumed dead. He emphasized that the government would thoroughly investigate the cause of the crash and implement measures to prevent similar incidents in the future. The acting president also ordered relevant agencies to deploy all available equipment, personnel, and infrastructure to aid recovery efforts. Choi also stressed the need for utmost caution to ensure the safety of firefighters during the rescue operation. This would be South Korea's worst domestic civil aviation disaster and marks the first major fatal incident involving a low-cost airline in the country's history. Acting President Choi Sang-mok declared a national mourning period until January 4 following the crash. He added that 17 memorial altars would be set up nationwide. Flags at government offices would be flown at half-mast, and civil servants would wear black ribbons. This incident marks the first major test for Choi, who assumed office after South Korea's parliament voted to impeach the interim president earlier. After the tragic accident, the Boeing 737-800 aircraft immediately became a topic of interest. This is one of the world's most popular planes, with nearly 200 airlines operating the Boeing 737-80, accounting for about 15% of the global fleet. According to Cirium, an aviation data provider, approximately 28,000 passenger planes are currently in operation worldwide. The aircraft is particularly popular in Asia, Europe, and North America, and Boeing has delivered about 5,000 units to customers since 1998. This aircraft is very safe and has a good safety record, said Najmuddin Mishkati, a professor of engineering at the University of Southern California. Authorities are still conducting investigations to reach a final conclusion on the cause of this heartbreaking tragedy. Thank you for listening to today's case story. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to catch more gripping cases on our channel.